The sky above Earth was torn open as massive ships, shaped like dark, jagged stones, appeared from the stars. They were unlike anything humans had ever seen. Their technology was far beyond anything Earth could imagine. The air grew heavy with the sound of their arrival, and the people of Earth stared up in horror and awe. These were the Red Dragon Clan, a species so powerful and terrifying that their name alone was enough to send shivers down the spine of even the bravest soldier. Led by Koresh, the mighty matriarch of the clan, the Red Dragons had a reputation. They were conquerors, traveling across galaxies to claim worlds, leaving nothing but ashes in their wake. Their strength, their fire, their sheer size made them almost unstoppable. No one had dared stand in their way for centuries. Earth had no chance, or so everyone thought. The Red Dragon Clan had set their sights on Earth, and their massive ships hovered over major cities, casting shadows over the land. The Earth's leaders quickly realized there was no way to stop them. They sent every fighter jet, every missile, every weapon they had to the sky. But the Red Dragons didn't move to attack immediately. They only observed. In the heart of one of Earth's major cities, Dr. Ethan Hale, a scientist working on the mysterious biology of extraterrestrial creatures, watched the sky with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He had spent years studying alien species, but nothing had prepared him for the arrival of the Red Dragons. "They're here," Ethan muttered to himself, pacing back and forth in his small laboratory. The news broadcasts were filled with panic, warning everyone to stay inside to prepare for war. But Ethan wasn't concerned with the war. He had a strange, nagging thought in the back of his mind. Ethan had been studying dragon-like species for a while, after discovering old texts and artifacts hinting at the existence of such creatures. He had never thought they would be real. Now, with the Red Dragon Clan hovering above the planet, his research suddenly felt very real and very urgent. There was something odd about these dragons. Ethan had come across a theory. Certain human DNA strands might be able to interact with the dragon species in a way that could create a bond. But he didn't fully understand what that meant. Could humans communicate with the dragons? Could they be more than just enemies? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden beep from his computer. His research results had just come in, and his eyes widened in surprise. There was a genetic connection, a possibility that human beings were somehow linked to the dragon species, but it was still unclear. The Red Dragon Clan's ships suddenly began descending lower into Earth's atmosphere. Their massive forms blocked out the sun, and the world held its breath. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge. But for some reason, Ethan felt strangely calm. Perhaps it was the scientist in him, or perhaps it was the deep connection he felt to these creatures, even though he had never seen one up close. As the dragons landed, their colossal feet shaking the earth, the world's military forces were ready to fight. Every country, every government had prepared for this moment, expecting an invasion that would wipe out humanity. Soldiers took their positions, weapons in hand, ready to defend their homes. But the dragons did not immediately attack. They remained still, waiting. Ethan's mind raced. What was happening? Why were they just sitting there? He quickly rushed to the main government building, hoping to speak with someone in charge. He had to get to the military leaders before they made any rash decisions. The human race needed to understand the dragons, not just fight them. As he entered the meeting room, he found several generals and military leaders already gathered, discussing plans to defend the planet. "Dr. Hale, what are you doing here?" General Harris, the chief military officer, barked. "I need to speak with you. I believe these dragons are not just here to destroy us," Ethan said quickly, trying to make his voice steady. "I've been studying them. There's something you need to know." "What are you talking about?" Harris asked, raising an eyebrow. "These dragons, they might be able to communicate with us. I've been researching them, and there's a theory I've developed. If we could somehow interact with them on a biological level, we might be able to form some kind of understanding." "You're crazy," Harris said, shaking his head. "These creatures came here to conquer us. There's no way they'll listen to us." "I understand how this looks," Ethan replied, "but we have to try. If we fight them, it could lead to total destruction. But if we understand them, if we can communicate, it might be our only chance." The room was silent as the military leaders processed Ethan's words. Finally, General Harris spoke. "All right, Dr. Hale, you have 1 hour to prove this. We'll hold off on attacking for now, but if anything goes wrong, we will defend ourselves." Ethan nodded, his heart racing. He had 1 hour to convince the world's leaders that the Red Dragon clan wasn't their enemy. He had 1 hour to change the fate of humanity. Outside, the dragons still sat quietly, their enormous bodies towering over the landscape. Their eyes glowed red and their scales shimmered in the sunlight. Ethan had no idea how he would communicate with them, but he had to try. Time was running out. As he left the meeting, he glanced up at the sky, feeling the weight of the moment. The Red Dragon clan was here, and humanity's fate rested in the hands of a single scientist. The world held its breath as the dragons sat, their massive forms looming in the sky, silent and still. Earth's military was on high alert, their soldiers watching the dragons closely, ready for an attack. But the dragons did not move. It was an eerie silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Dr. Ethan Hale stood in the middle of the command center, his heart pounding. General Harris had agreed to give him an hour, but Ethan wasn't sure what he could do. How could he possibly communicate with these creatures, these massive, powerful beings who had the power to destroy entire cities with a single breath of fire? Ethan had a theory, of course. The research he had done into dragon biology suggested there was something unusual about these creatures. They're young, they're hatchlings, seemed to be able to bond with humans in a way that no one had expected. But could he prove it? Could he actually make contact? "Dr. Hale, we're running out of time," a voice said from behind him. It was Lieutenant Mason, a young officer who had been working with Ethan on the research. Ethan turned to face him, shaking his head. "I don't know how, Mason. I just know there's a chance." "There has to be." Mason looked uneasy. "You think they'll listen to you?" "I'm not sure," Ethan admitted. "But we have to try. If we don't, we're going to lose everything." The minutes seemed to crawl by. Outside, the dragon's ships were still. Their enormous bodies shimmered in the sunlight, but they didn't move. The humans were waiting for the first sign of aggression, but it never came. Then, suddenly, a loud noise rang out from one of the ships. It wasn't the sound of an attack. It was the sound of something different, something softer. Ethan rushed to the window, his eyes wide with surprise. The hatchlings. A small group of dragonlings, tiny, wingless creatures with scales that sparkled like jewels, had emerged from the ship. They were not large like the adults, but they were still impressive in their own way. Their eyes were bright and curious as they wandered out into the open air. The dragon's young weren't attacking or threatening anything. They seemed confused, almost lost. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the moment he had been waiting for? "I need to go out there," he said quickly, turning to Mason. "These hatchlings, they might be the key." "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Mason asked, clearly concerned. "It's the only idea we have," Ethan replied, already heading for the door. "Stay here. If anything goes wrong, you'll need to call for backup." Ethan didn't wait for a reply. He ran outside, moving as quickly as he could toward the group of hatchlings. The air was thick with tension, and every step he took felt heavier than the last. He knew the eyes of the world were on him, but right now all he could focus on were the dragons. When he reached them, the hatchlings stopped moving. They turned their heads, their bright eyes staring at him. They were small compared to their parents, but still intimidating. Their scales were a deep red, almost glowing in the sunlight, and their tails flicked nervously. Ethan stopped a few feet away, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. He had no weapons, no armor, just himself and his knowledge. He took a deep breath and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Hello," he said, though he wasn't sure if the hatchlings would understand him. "I'm not here to harm you. I just want to help." For a moment, nothing happened. The hatchlings simply stared at him, their eyes narrowing as they studied him. Then, one of them took a small step forward. Ethan's heart raced. He stayed perfectly still, not wanting to startle the creature. Slowly, the dragonling came closer, sniffing the air around him. It seemed to be studying him as if trying to make sense of him. "Please," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "I know you don't understand, but I can help you. You don't have to fight." The hatchling hesitated for a moment, then, to Ethan's surprise, it nudged him gently with its snout. The soft touch of the dragon's nose against his chest sent a shock of warmth through him. Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't what he had expected. Before he could react, another hatchling approached. Then another. Soon a small group of them had gathered around him, pressing their tiny bodies against him like they were seeking comfort. Ethan didn't know what to think, but he didn't move. He slowly crouched down, allowing the dragonlings to curl up around him. "What is happening?" Mason's voice crackled through the comms. Dr. Hale, are you okay? You're surrounded by... I'm fine, Ethan said, still kneeling among the hatchlings. He couldn't stop the smile that tugged at his lips. These creatures, these fearsome dragons, were acting like... Pets? No, not pets. They were seeking something. They were seeking safety. The hatchlings continued to nuzzle against him, and Ethan realized something important. These dragons were not the monsters they were made out to be. The adults were powerful, yes, but the young ones were just that young, vulnerable, in need of care. But why? Why were they acting like this? Just then, a loud roar sounded from above, and Ethan looked up. Karish, the matriarch of the Red Dragon clan, had appeared. She was enormous, her wings stretching out wide as she landed nearby. The ground shook as she touched down, her red scales gleaming like molten lava. Humyn. Karish's voice boomed, and everyone in the command center froze. What are you doing with my young? Ethan stood up slowly, keeping his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. I'm not hurting them, I'm helping them. Karish's piercing gaze locked onto him, and for a moment the entire world seemed to hold its breath. She was so much larger than he was, her power undeniable. But Ethan stood his ground, his voice steady. They trust me, he said softly, glancing at the hatchlings. I think they need humans. For a long moment, Karish didn't speak. She simply watched, her eyes narrowing. Then finally she spoke. You claim to understand them, she said slowly, her voice dripping with skepticism. But you know nothing about the Red Dragon clan. Ethan looked back at the hatchlings, who were still curled around him, their eyes gentle and trusting. No, he said quietly. But I'm learning. The air crackled with tension as Karish, the mighty matriarch of the Red Dragon clan, towered over Dr. Ethan Hale. Her massive form was intimidating, her wings unfurled like the sails of a great ship. The ground beneath her trembled with every movement, her sharp eyes fixed on Ethan. The hatchlings still curled around him, their tiny bodies nestled in his arms and against his chest. Ethan stood still, his heart racing. Despite the power that radiated from Karish, he didn't back down. The dragonlings had shown him trust. They had shown him something deep and unspoken. Now he had to prove that he could be trusted in return. You dare touch my young? Karish's voice echoed through the quiet air, sharp and filled with anger. You are a mere human, weak and insignificant. What right do you have to be so close to them? The soldiers and commanders who had been watching from the distance could feel the weight of Karish's words. They had been preparing for war, but now they were witnessing a battle of wills. Ethan, a single human standing alone against the fury of a dragon queen. But Ethan wasn't just any human. He had spent his life studying creatures from faraway worlds. He understood biology, instincts, and, most importantly, the emotions of living beings. He knew that the dragons, even though they were fierce and mighty, had their own fears, their own vulnerabilities. And the hatchlings had shown him trust. If he could prove that he was not a threat, maybe, just maybe, the Red Dragon clan would see him as more than just an enemy. I'm not your enemy, Ethan said softly, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. He stepped forward carefully, not wanting to startle Karish. I'm trying to help them. Your young are different. They have a bond with humans. I've seen it. Karish's eyes flashed with suspicion. She glanced down at her hatchlings, who were still nestled around Ethan, looking up at their mother with wide eyes. They weren't afraid of him. In fact, they seemed at peace, resting against him as if they had found their safe place. Foolish human, Karish growled. These creatures are born to fight, to conquer. They do not need your help, and certainly not your compassion. Ethan shook his head. That's not true, he said, his voice filled with urgency. They need care, not war. They're not ready for battle. They don't even understand what war is. They just need protection. The matriarch stepped forward, her large wings fluttering. The air shifted with the force of her movement. You speak of protection, but all you're doing is coddling them. You are weak. You are offering them something that will only make them soft, and soft dragons do not survive in our world. Ethan took a deep breath. He couldn't let Karish's words shake him. He had to be strong. For the hatchlings, for humanity, for the future of both species. Their world doesn't have to be about war, Ethan said firmly. I understand that dragons have been warriors for centuries, but these hatchlings, they deserve a chance to grow. They deserve a chance to learn peace just like we do. Karish let out a low, rumbling growl, her massive form looming over him like a storm cloud. And what would you know about dragons? You are a fragile human with no wings, no claws, no fire. You have no understanding of what it means to be a red dragon. Ethan met her gaze without flinching. "Maybe I don't know everything about being a dragon," he said quietly. "But I know that humans are capable of more than just fighting. We can be more than just warriors. We can be protectors, healers, teachers. I'm trying to help your hatchlings. They trust me, Koresh. And maybe, just maybe, they could teach you something too." The dragon matriarch froze, her fiery eyes narrowing. The hatchlings, sensing the shift in their mother's mood, looked up at her with curiosity. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps the matriarch was beginning to see the possibility of something different. For a long moment, there was only silence. Koresh's gaze flicked between Ethan and her hatchlings, who had not moved from their positions. The fire in her eyes seemed to cool for just a moment. Then, with a heavy sigh, Koresh finally spoke. "You think you can change what has been for centuries?" she said, her voice softer now, though still filled with doubt. "You think these dragons born to fight can become something else?" "I believe they can," Ethan replied without hesitation. "I believe all creatures, even dragons, have the ability to choose their path. And right now the path your young are on is one of peace, not war." Koresh looked down at the hatchlings once more. They were still asleep in Ethan's arms, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each gentle breath. They looked peaceful. They looked like they were at home. "You are a strange human, Dr. Hale," Koresh said, her voice filled with both anger and a strange sort of amusement. "But your words, they are not without merit." Ethan felt a small spark of victory in his chest, though he dared not celebrate yet. "You don't have to trust me completely, Koresh. But maybe you can trust them. Your hatchlings." Koresh narrowed her eyes at him, the fire of her ancient power still glowing in her chest. "You think your compassion will change the course of our future? You are a fool." Ethan stood his ground even as his heart pounded in his chest. "I think your hatchlings are the future, and they're choosing peace. They're choosing me, and maybe in time they'll show you that it's possible to protect without fighting." For a long moment, Koresh didn't speak. She merely stared at him, her fiery eyes unblinking. Then finally she gave a low, rumbling laugh. "Perhaps you are not entirely foolish, human," she said, her voice softening just a little. "But remember this, I am the Red Dragon clan's leader. I do not bend easily."
"If you wish to continue this foolishness, you will have to prove yourself."
"Not to me, but to my people." Ethan nodded slowly, not sure what she meant, but understanding that this was just the beginning. "I'll prove it," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "I'll show them." With that, Koresh turned away, her massive form sweeping across the ground as she began to leave. "We shall see," she said over her shoulder. "We shall see." Ethan watched as the matriarch disappeared into the distance, leaving him alone with the hatchlings. His heart was still racing, but he knew one thing for sure. The battle had only just begun. Not for survival, but for understanding. The days following the encounter with Koresh, the Red Dragon matriarch, were tense, filled with uncertainty. The humans had never dealt with creatures as powerful as the dragons, and yet here they were, surrounded by them. On the other side, the dragons had never encountered a species like humans, who seemed to offer something they had never known: care, understanding, and peace. Dr. Ethan Hale couldn't shake the images of the hatchlings nestled against him, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each soft breath. They had trusted him, and he had to prove that they weren't just innocent creatures. They were the key to something much greater. Ethan spent his days with the hatchlings, observing them as they played and napped in his lab, their presence a quiet comfort. Each one seemed to develop its own unique personality. Some were curious, exploring every corner of the room with their small claws. Others were more reserved, content to curl up and rest, their wings barely unfolding. The most curious thing was how they seemed to respond to Ethan's voice, looking at him with a kind of recognition when he spoke. While Ethan worked with the hatchlings, the world's leaders were still on edge. The Red Dragon clan had not attacked, but the war was not over. Koresh had made it clear that she didn't trust humans, but she was willing to see what would happen. That in itself was a huge shift. However, Ethan knew that her trust was fragile, and there was still much to prove. Late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan sat on the ground surrounded by the hatchlings. He had been talking to them softly, explaining the world around them in simple terms, trying to form a deeper bond. He didn't know if they truly understood, but there was something comforting in the way they responded. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. Ethan looked up, expecting to see a familiar face, but instead it was Koresh. She stood at the edge of the room, watching him with piercing eyes. Her massive form was still intimidating, her presence powerful and commanding. The hatchlings immediately looked up at her, their eyes wide. Some of them even made small noises, stretching their tiny wings in the direction of their mother. Ethan's heart tightened. Despite her cold words, the hatchlings still recognized Koresh, still saw her as their protector. Koresh took a few steps forward, her gaze flicking between Ethan and the hatchlings. "You've spent much time with them," she said, her voice still a low growl but with a hint of something else, curiosity perhaps. "Do you think you can change them?" Ethan stood slowly, carefully placing a few of the hatchlings down as he rose. He met Koresh's gaze with calm determination. "I don't want to change them. I just want to help them grow. They're not ready for the world you want them to inherit. They need to learn peace, not battle." Koresh's eyes narrowed, but this time her gaze softened just a little. She seemed to consider his words for a long moment before speaking again. "You speak of peace, but peace is not in our nature," Koresh replied quietly. "We are dragons. We are born for battle. For centuries we have fought, and it is in our blood to do so. You cannot change what is written in our souls." Ethan's voice was steady, though his heart raced. "Maybe we're not meant to change everything, but I believe we can choose how we live. I believe your hatchlings can choose something different. They don't need to follow the same path as the rest of the clan. They don't have to fight." Koresh's eyes softened for just a moment. "You are foolish, Humyn. Do you not understand? The universe is a harsh place. It is survival of the fittest. We, the Red Dragons, have survived because we are strong, because we fight. Without strength, there is only weakness." "I know," Ethan said quietly, his eyes not leaving hers. "But strength isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing when to fight and when to protect. Your hatchlings, they don't know the world of war. They only know what they feel, safety, comfort. And that's something they deserve." Koresh's expression hardened again, her claws scraping the stone floor. "You think they will remain soft forever, do you? You think the universe will spare them because of their bond to a human?" "No," Ethan said. "I think they will become something different. Something more. They will be strong, but not because they fight. They will be strong because they choose to protect the ones they love." For a long moment there was only silence. The hatchlings had grown restless, shifting around as if sensing the tension between the two. Ethan crouched down slowly, reaching for one of the smaller hatchlings. He placed it gently on his chest where it curled up against him, the warmth of its small body bringing a strange peace. Koresh watched him, her gaze never leaving the sight of Ethan with the hatchling. The quiet moment stretched on, and slowly, the anger in Koresh's eyes began to fade, replaced by something almost like doubt. "You have a strange power over them, Humyn," Koresh said, her voice softer than before. "They trust you, but you are not a dragon. You cannot understand the weight of our world." Ethan looked up at her, feeling a flicker of hope in his chest. "I don't need to be a dragon to understand. I only need to understand them." The silence stretched on for a few more moments before Koresh spoke again, her tone heavy. "I will give you one chance, Humyn. One chance to prove that your way is possible. But know this, if you fail, if you cannot protect them, then I will take them back. I will raise them as dragons, and they will learn the ways of battle." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'll prove it. I won't fail." For the first time, Koresh seemed to study him with a hint of respect in her eyes. She turned and walked toward the door, her massive tail sweeping behind her. "We shall see, Humyn. We shall see if your words are more than just empty promises." As the matriarch of the Red Dragon clan left the room, Ethan stood there, the hatchling still nestled on his chest. The challenge had been set. The dragons had given him a chance. Now he had to prove that peace could be the true strength of their future. He looked down at the hatchling, which was now peacefully asleep in his arms. Ethan smiled softly, the weight of the moment settling on him. "I won't let you down," he whispered to the tiny dragon, knowing that in this fight, the stakes were higher than he could ever have imagined. The days that followed were a blur of tension, learning, and small victories. Dr. Ethan Hale had made his promise, and now he had to make it a reality. The eyes of the world and the eyes of the Red Dragon clan were upon him. The future of humanity and the future of the dragons rested on what he could accomplish. Koresh, the matriarch, had given him one chance. One chance to prove that dragons and humans could coexist, that the hatchlings could grow up without war. without the burden of their clan's ancient traditions. And though the challenge was enormous, Ethan believed in the hatchlings. He had seen their potential. He had seen their hearts. For the next few weeks, Ethan worked tirelessly. Each day he spent hours with the hatchlings, speaking to them, playing with them, and teaching them the ways of humans. The hatchlings were eager to learn. They didn't want to fight, they wanted to understand. Ethan could see the bond growing between them, a bond that was unlike anything he had ever seen in any creature. They trusted him completely. At the same time, Koresh and the other adult dragons watched from a distance. They didn't interfere, but their eyes were always upon him. Their patience was running thin, but they held back, waiting to see if Ethan's efforts would amount to anything. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. The hatchlings, who had grown much stronger in the weeks since they first arrived on Earth, began to display strange behaviors. Instead of simply playing or resting, they started to imitate the movements they had seen in Ethan. One hatchling stood up on its hind legs, then extended its wings, flapping them awkwardly as if trying to mimic human movement. Ethan watched in amazement as another hatchling began to pick up small objects with its claws, mimicking the way Ethan would pick up his tools. The hatchlings were learning not just from instinct, but from Ethan's guidance. They were becoming more curious, more intelligent, and more aware of the world around them. It was at that moment that Ethan knew he had succeeded. The hatchlings were not only capable of learning peace and understanding, but they were choosing it. As the sun began to set that evening, a familiar shadow fell over the room. Koresh entered, her eyes sharp and unwavering. She had been watching from a distance, but now she was here, face to face with Ethan. "I have seen your progress, Humyn," she said, her voice low but not as harsh as it had been. "The hatchlings have grown stronger. They have learned. But the question remains, will they remain weak or will they grow to be true red dragons?" Ethan stood up slowly, meeting Koresh's gaze. "They're not weak, Koresh. They're strong in a different way. They've learned empathy. They've learned what it means to protect, not to destroy." Koresh looked down at the hatchlings, who were now playing together, gently nudging each other with their small snouts. The sight was soft, peaceful. It was a far cry from the warlike dragons she had raised for so many centuries. She could see that Ethan's words had some truth to them. "Their strength is not in fire and claws," Ethan continued, stepping forward. "It's in their ability to choose their path. They don't have to be warriors. They can be protectors. They can be leaders, but in a way that creates peace, not destruction." Koresh's eyes softened just a little. It was a rare moment. The fierce matriarch, the queen of the Red Dragon clan, was beginning to understand. Slowly but surely the foundations of her beliefs were starting to crack. "I will admit, Humyn," Koresh said quietly, "you have done something I never thought possible. I see it in their eyes. They do not fear you. They trust you. And perhaps that is enough." Ethan's heart raced. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The moment he could prove that his belief in peace and understanding was not just a dream, but a reality. "But do you believe it, Koresh?" he asked gently. "Do you believe that they can choose this path? A path of peace?" Koresh was silent for a long moment, her fiery gaze fixed on the hatchlings. The small dragons who had once been so fearful of the unknown now played without a care in the world. They were surrounded by safety, love, and care. And for the first time, Koresh realized that maybe, just maybe, there was another way for them to live. She turned to face Ethan, her massive form towering over him. "I do not know if I can change everything," she said, her voice filled with the weight of centuries of tradition. "But I see now that you and your kind have something the Red Dragon clan has long forgotten. You have the ability to see beyond battle. You have the ability to protect, not just to conquer." Ethan smiled, a small but powerful smile. "I believe in them, Koresh, and I believe in you." The matriarch's eyes narrowed slightly, but this time there was no anger in her gaze. "You are a strange human," she said, "but I will admit I have underestimated you. And perhaps there is more to you than I thought." Koresh took a deep breath and turned toward the hatchlings, who were now resting peacefully at Ethan's feet. The dragons had not once shown aggression toward him. They had trusted him completely, and now Koresh had to trust him as well. "For now," Koresh said, her voice steady and calm, "I will allow this to continue. But know this, Humyn. You must prove that your way is the right way. If these hatchlings are to grow without the blood of battle, you must show them that the world can be more than just war." Ethan nodded, knowing that the road ahead was long and uncertain. There would be challenges. There would be doubts. But for now, they had taken the first step toward a new future, a future where dragons and humans could coexist in peace. And as the hatchlings curled up once more around Ethan, he knew that this was only the beginning. Together, humans and dragons could build a world that was stronger, not because of war, but because of understanding. "I will protect them, Koresh," Ethan said softly. "I will protect them all." The Red Dragon clan, once a symbol of destruction and fear, now had the chance to become something more. And so did humanity. It was a new beginning, one that neither the dragons nor the humans had ever imagined.